Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 188, recorded live on Monday, February 10th, 2014. I am your host and the man responsible for the 5th Olympic ring not opening up Friday night. Sorry about that. I was sleeping at the wheel, was checking out the Jamaican bobsled team, and screwed up. But I'm your host, Todd Klindt. I'll be here all night, so you can save your questions for the end. I'll be here. No problems about that. And the folks that make this all happen, I got my flag back up. Don't know if you guys noticed. Had taken that down when we were filming our SharePoint conference videos, and so, but I got that back up. So got the Rackspace flag because Rackspace makes all this possible. They got me the flag, they got me the monitor. They don't know, but they actually bought me that sheet from Walmart. Don't tell my boss that I expensed that, but they make all this possible. So to make, to help fund this thing and let them know that I'm out there spreading the good news, go to sharepoint.rackspace.com. You can find out about the different offerings we've got going on. You can find out where we're going to be, the stuff, the conferences and all those kind of things. They got like a blog aggregator there for all of our SharePoint, blogs, and all kinds of good stuff. So go to sharepoint.rackspace.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at ShareP911. So that's the funny story about all that with the whole trademark there and all that kind of stuff. ShareP911 has not gotten us in trouble. So you can follow the SharePoint folks at Rackspace. There. So an interesting thing about that, I always talk about Rackspace. I've been at Rackspace now. Well, here in a couple of days, it will be 2 full years since I've been a Rackspace employee, and it's been a good time. It's gone by fast. Apparently, any of you that I'm friends with on LinkedIn was kind enough to put the whole work anniversary thing up there. So all of a sudden, I just started getting these emails, which is kind of funny because I never go to LinkedIn. But it's been a good couple of years. Now, I always talk about that I work at Rackspace. When I give up my email address on the Netcast, I always give it out as todd.klint@rackspace.com. And a couple of times we've had this happen, and happened here just last week. A Rackspace customer that I have not been working with as a Rackspace customer, so somebody I know from the community or a Netcast listener or somebody who I've talked to a session or whatever, but is a Rackspace customer, has had, we'll say, not a perfect experience with Rackspace. Happened last week, and that person shot me an email. And so I bring that up because that's a good thing, and I want you to do that if you've got a problem. Now, I'm not always going to have the solution, and Lord knows I have exactly 0 authority at Rackspace, so I can't really get anything done. But if you're having a problem with something and it seems like you're not getting the answer you want or something like that, don't be shy. Shoot me an email. Like I said, I can't always promise that I can do anything, but man, if people on the SharePoint team aren't making our customers happy, I want to know because I want to be able to fix it. And we've absolutely changed some of our policies and the way we do things because of emails that people have gotten outside of the regular thing. When our guys, we've got some great guys on the team, when they start working on something, they get heads down. Sometimes they kind of get that laser focus on getting the problem solved, and sometimes there's some bigger issue things to look at. And so shooting me an email or whatever, if you want to do that, I welcome it. I encourage it. Don't be shy. Again, can't promise that I can do anything, but I'm certainly eager to try to help. So you can find out SharePoint@rackspace.com. So the production notes, the last week's production went pretty well. I got everything rendered out pretty quickly. Might have set a record, actually. I got the MP3 out, I think, on Tuesday. I'll be damned. But that all went pretty well. I added a couple things. I added a screenshot on the blog post, screenshot from the YouTube thing. That's kind of nice, kind of adds some color, things like that. Tonight, before we went live, I tried using the new Ustream producer to do the streaming part, and it failed miserably, exploded right in my face, like the cigar thing, and kind of peeled back and all that kind of stuff. So haven't given up on that, though. Would like to do that. That will make the streaming experience a little better for the folks in the chat room, because I can screenshots and do all that kind of stuff. But definitely doing that. From another production note standpoint, still looking at renaming it. Again, I just need to shoot those names over to our marketing guys and my boss and make sure that's all good. But hopefully, before the SharePoint conference, I'll have a new name and all that for this. A bunch of you guys have tweeted me names and emailed me names. Thanks for all that. I appreciate all those. And hopefully, within a couple of weeks, we'll have something new for that. We can we'll have to get SharePoint out of the name. Now, don't think that I'm giving up on SharePoint. That is not the case. But like I talked about a month or so ago, Microsoft has gone out and done a fresh round of cracking down on name trademark infringement, and I was guilty of that with my Windows Phone app. So I kind of want to rebrand everything, rename everything. And in the last a year or so, we've been talking about non-SharePoint stuff here and there as it makes sense. Windows 8's been a big topic, all that. So that will be reflected in the new show. But hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have that all figured out. Now on to topics. So one of my listeners out there, which is I was flattered that this guy's a listener, Bram de Jager. He's from Belgium, I believe, over in Europe. I think he's even an MCM, kind of a big deal. But anyway, he's been listening to the Netcast, and he has a Codeplex project that he wanted me to talk about. If I don't normally talk about things just to talk about them, but if I see things on the web that I like, or people blog things that I like, I'm not above talking about other people's content. That's not something that bothers me. But Bram has written a SharePoint client browser for SharePoint 2010 and 2013. And the emphasis for this, and the thing that makes this thing really cool, is the client side. There's nothing that you need to install on the server. And because of that, it works with Office 365 and also on-premises SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. So what Bram's client browser does is it's an app that runs on your workstation. So again, not on the server. So I ran it on my Windows 8.1 box here. And it lets you kind of dig into your SharePoint sites and webs and lists and all that kind of thing to see kind of what's going on in the background. You can get some raw data. You can see some counts. So I can think of some things that would use this. I've seen problems in the past where if the workflow history list gets really big in a web or a site collection, it can cause some performance issues, but there's really no great way to get to it because it's a hidden list, and without knowing where it's at and all that, it can be kind of tough to get to. But Bram's thing will show it. So if you go out to SPCB, so SharePoint Client Browser, spcd.codeplex.com, you can download it. There's no huge install or anything like that. But it's a really great little tool to just kind of go through, and it just exposes a bunch of things. So it's kind of like there's another tool out there on Codeplex, and I've forgotten. Is it Sushi? I forget. But there's another Codeplex project that's very similar to that, but definitely like that. So Bram, thanks for listening, for one, and thanks for writing this tool. It's kind of cool. I've got it now in my list of. I've got a directory full of tools that I always use when I get onto servers or I'm troubleshooting things, and that's things like Procmon and ULS Viewer and things like that. I've added this SharePoint Manager. That's the one. Trevor in the chat room got it. SharePoint Manager is the one that I've seen before. But that SharePoint Manager requires you to run it on the server because it uses the object model. But this is another one of those tools I kind of dropped in that folder. Kind of cool for just taking a high-level view of things. So you can get that at spcb.codeplex.com. And again, thanks to Bram for sharing that with us and writing for us. So go download that a bunch of times. Make Bram feel good. He should definitely feel good. Okay, so another one. This was one, and I need to hit this up a couple of the places on my blog and all that. As you guys know, I have a little bit of passing interest in patching SharePoint servers. So this happened several years ago with the SharePoint 2010 Ignite program before SharePoint 2010 came out. I did a session on patching, and just kind of always been interested in it since then. So I've got my SharePoint 2010 build list, my SharePoint 2013 build list, and all that fun stuff. So it's just something that I find interesting, get a lot of questions about. It's been a good topic. So I was very interested to learn last week when Steve Peshka, so Steve works at Microsoft, and I don't know what his official title is, but he's kind of a big deal around Microsoft. And one of the people that has always been there helping write Ignite material, things like that. So Steve posted a blog post on the 6th of February here at blogs.technet.com/b/speshka, common spelling. Peshka is spelled P-E-S-C-H-K-A. And he talks about a reversal that Microsoft has made on patching SharePoint 2013, specifically around patching the distributed cache. So, as we all know, our friend, the distributed cache, is a piece of software called AppFabric. And when we run the prerequisite installer, it goes out and installs a version of AppFabric. We install SharePoint, it configures that, and we've been told from the very first time we ever laid our eyes on those shiny SharePoint 2013 bits to stay away from AppFabric. When you install AppFabric, it puts some shortcuts on the desktop or the start screen. Don't touch them. You might think you know how to tweak AppFabric. You don't. SharePoint uses a very specific version of it. It uses it in a very specific way, and we were told in no uncertain terms, do not patch AppFabric to patch the distributed cache, that the SharePoint patches will take care of that. Don't do it on your own. Don't be a hero. Nobody likes a hero. Just let SharePoint take care of it. And we've all done that. We haven't done it. We haven't patched anything. We've left it alone. We've installed the March public update and all those kind of things. So on the 6th, Steve came out and said, you know about that thing where we told you never to patch AppFabric? Well, now we're saying you can patch AppFabric on your own. And not only can you, but you actually should. You actually should not be running the default version anymore. There's a patch that you should put on it that will help with some bug fixes and performance and all that kind of stuff. So they have completely flipped around on that. So you can read Steve's blog post, and there is it references a KB article where they kind of officially say that, and that is KB 2843251, where they officially say that you can go ahead and patch AppFabric. And in Steve's blog post, he mentions that specifically for AppFabric 1.1, which is what SharePoint 2013 uses, we should patch it up to the cumulative update 4 level, and that is KB 2800726. Now, what this probably means is that I'm probably going to have to start listing those on my patches pages so that people have a chance to figure out where those are at. Before I do that, though, I need to figure out how to determine what version AppFabric is, and I've got a couple of ideas on how to do that. And then I got to figure out when those patches come out, where they're at. So it will happen eventually, but for now, just you'll have to take the links in the show notes for this. But once I kind of get the whole picture of how to tell what version you're running and where to get the new version and all that, I will add it to my SharePoint 2013 builds page so you can keep up with that. It'll probably be right below the Office web apps, or maybe above them, I'm not sure. But kind of the news story for here is that not only can you patch AppFabric, you should patch AppFabric, and you're going to want to get that to cumulative update 4. Now, there are very few things on this earth that scare me more than patching the distributed cache, but I think we're going to have to start doing that. So I have not done that yet, either in the wild or on a test box, and so once I do that, if I have any notes, I'll let you know, and I'll probably blog this too, so I have something to link to it. Doug in the chat room is asking, can you do a patch page on Office 365 along with regressions? So that's a tough one, Doug, because as far as I know, they don't really let you know when they patch that. So I would have to go out to Office 365 with Fiddler and then catch the builds page, the build number, and then, I don't even know how I would do that. But that brings up an interesting point. Jeremy Thake, a friend of mine, had a blog post on that 6-8 months ago maybe about how, part of the appeal of Office 365 and other cloud-based anything, Dropbox or whatever, Salesforce, is that since it's all on cloud servers, they can just roll these patches out. That was one of the things that when Microsoft bought Yammer, that was one of the things they wanted to get from Yammer, was how Yammer's team just did these rolling patches. And so that's one of the great things. You don't have to worry about that. You're always getting the latest stuff. But as Office 365 users, and I'm sure users of other cloud services as well, have noticed is that these regressions, now you can't control that. So if you read, my blog and read my builds page, when a new patch comes out, you can see the list of regressions and say, I'm not touching that one. With a 10-foot pole, I'm going to wait, until the next service pack or whatever. With cloud services, you don't have that flexibility. They just patch it in the middle of the night and you wake up the next morning and your stuff's patched. So the regressions, I don't know where we would get those lists of regressions other than just people complaining about them. I don't know that Microsoft publishes that anywhere. But the other thing is, these patches happen whenever, and there's not much you can do. So I don't know how I would even begin to keep track of that. If you have any ideas, I'll be honest, I don't use Office 365 a whole lot. If you have any ideas on how I can do that, I would absolutely be happy to add that, but I just don't know how I would be able to do it and keep up on it and make it useful. Now in the chat room, people are getting all of Twitter about the fact that I use Fiddler. Fiddler is not a developer tool exclusively. Fiddler is a great tool for admins. Earlier when I was talking about Bram's SPCB and I mentioned my folder of tools that I use, Fiddler is absolutely in there. That is a great tool. For those of you that haven't experienced Fiddler, you want to go get that right now, probably before you finish this podcast. If you're in your car, pull over and get on your phone and do something and download that. You can get it at, if you go to fiddler2.com, that will redirect you. Fiddler was bought by a company called Telerik, so you can also go to telerik.com/fiddler. But it is a tool that lets you fiddle with web requests. That's where its name comes from. So one of the things that you can do is see headers and all that inside of your web packet. So you can get a lot of great information from SharePoint with Fiddler. One of the things you can get is the build number. And so that is one of the ways you can do it. And that was how, I guess with Office 365, I don't know how else you would get it. But again, I don't use Office 365 very much. But if you are an IT pro, you have to have Fiddler in your arsenal, and you should just fire it up and use it and just kind of see what it does before you need it, because you're going to see that it gives you all kinds of great information, and then you'll find ways to use it. I think the first time I ever used Fiddler was we had a Mark Crispin in the chat room just mentioned it. It was performance. So we had some slow loading pages. And one of the things that Fiddler does is it shows you every request and how long it took. And then you can go to a view where it shows you how long pages took. And so you can see, like, if you've got really big files, then obviously it's going to show, so you can see that somebody embedded a bitmap on their page or something instead of a JPEG or a PNG. But the other great thing is when anybody ever comes to you and says SharePoint's slow, you can't really do much with that because you don't know what slow means. Slow isn't quantified. So hopefully you've all got some sort of a service level agreement or SLA, and in that SLA, page load times should be defined. So things like, front page has to load in less than 5 seconds, so on and so forth. And once you have objective numbers like that, then when someone says SharePoint is slow, you can load it up in a tool like Fiddler and see exactly how long it takes to load up. And then you know whether it's slow or not. So it's a good way to measure speed. In the chat room, Fabian Tilgman is talking about another common use for Fiddler, and that is for troubleshooting Kerberos. So Kerberos is interesting in that you just don't always know when it's working, though sometimes it's very obvious when it's not working. But one of the other pieces of information that Fiddler gives you is the authentication header. If you are hitting SharePoint over NTLM, it will say in the header, in Fiddler, NTLM. If you are hitting SharePoint via Kerberos, it will tell you, I can't tell what this is, but it looks like Kerberos because the header is encrypted. So it can't actually look inside, but it can tell by the type of structure that is probably Kerberos. So that is a great way when you start flipping all the bits inside of SharePoint to turn Kerberos on. Fiddler is a great way to make sure Kerberos is actually working, because you can get into the situation where you think Kerberos is working. It's not, but your web page still loads because just hitting the front page of SharePoint probably doesn't require Kerberos. But then you try to take that next step and do a BI thing or something, and then that doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you're not using Kerberos, but you didn't know that because your front page loaded. So Fiddler is a great tool to look at that authentication header and see what you're using. So I have no idea how I got off on that tangent, but Fiddler is good. Oh, Office 365. So Fiddler is good. Download Fiddler. You'll appreciate it. Yeah, right. I had some notes somewhere before Doug screwed this all up. Oh, yeah. So patch distributed cache. So once I do that, I'll blog this whole thing, and so that we can look at that. So this is one, and this came, I believe, out of a discussion that we had last week on this very netcast. And that is the answer to the question, what is the SharePoint Configuration Cache? SharePoint has all kinds of caches. It's got blob cache, it's got object cache, it's got page output cache. Some would say it's got mad cache, but it also has configuration cache. So the question came up, I think it was in the chat room. I don't remember where it was. It was very familiar when I saw the blog post come out. But Trevor Seward blogged at thesharepointfarm.com a blog post about what is the configuration cache. So the SharePoint configuration cache is a location on every server that's running SharePoint. And it's in, I should have made better notes, program data, Microsoft SharePoint config, something like that. And then in that directory, you're going to have one or more directories that are GUIDs, because we know how much SharePoint loves its GUIDs. You want to look for whichever one of those is the most recent. And inside of that directory, if you've got the configuration cache, if you found the right one, there's going to be hundreds or thousands of XML files, and then one itty-bitty lonely cache.ini file. What the configuration cache is, it's a place where each SharePoint box caches configuration objects from the configuration database. The configuration database has a big objects table that has everything, every object inside of SharePoint, from list items up to the farm. If you've been to one of Shane and I's talks and seen the world's greatest slide, all of that, anything that's an object is in that objects table. And it would just kill performance if every server had to go to the config database to pull out everything about every object. So SharePoint caches a bunch of this in that directory as these little XML snippets, and it's called the configuration cache. There are things that will trigger things being downloaded into that and all that. But what, as an admin, first read Trevor's blog post, and I'll be honest, I kind of skimmed it. Sorry, Trevor. But read it, get familiar with what the configuration cache is. But in reality, as a SharePoint administrator, there's really only one thing that you're ever going to do with the configuration cache, and that is clear it. So just had an issue today, was working with a SharePoint server, was seeing some weird behavior, and one of the recommended fixes, though it didn't at this time, one of the recommended fixes was to flush the configuration cache. And so what that does, and I'll go through the steps here in a minute, is that clears everything out of the cache and then forces SharePoint to go download new versions of everything. So like any kind of cache, it can get dirty, can get out of date. So if you want to clear the configuration cache, go to that directory, see program data, Microsoft SharePoint config, I think, and then whatever the newest GUID is. Before you do anything else, stop the window or the SharePoint timer job service. So if you're in PowerShell or the command line netstop sp timer v4, stop that thing, or you can go to Windows Services, whatever. Stop the timer job service, then go into that directory and delete all of the XML files. So I should be doing the PowerShell for this, but today when I did it, I did the command line stuff because it was off my memory. So del space star.xml, delete all of those. Before you do it though, do a dir to see how many there are, because I mean the box I was on today, there was like 1,800, something like that. Delete all the XML files. You're almost done. Then open up that cache.ini file, and there'll be a value in there, and that's how the box thinks it keeps track of whether its cache is current or not. So it's going to have like a 5 or 6 digit number in it. I just go in, change that number to 1. Just basically you're invalidating that cache number. Save that cache.ini file, net start sp timer v4, and then just sit back and watch those beautiful XML files roll in. When that timer job service comes up, it's going to check that ini file. It's going to see that it's invalid, and then it's going to go out to the config database and flush them all back out. So more than once in my career as a SharePoint doctor, I have flushed the configuration cache to fix issues. It's a very legit thing. So if you haven't ever played with the SharePoint configuration cache, go out to the SharePointFarm.com and look for the article and read up on that. Thanks again to Trevor Seward for that one. Okay, this is another fun one that I've been playing with. I've got a blog post coming out that will build off of this, but this is something I wanted to talk about because it's kind of a fun one. Oh, before we go, Mark in the chat room is asking if fdisk is an effective way to flush the cache. Yeah, I definitely would not discourage you from using fdisk, though these days it's I forget what the disk util is, disk util or whatever. Absolutely use that. There's no better way. I think that's the nuke it from orbit option for SharePoint. So one of this is a really obscure thing. As you all know, those of you who listen to this netcast, I'm a big fan of doing everything I can in PowerShell. And one of those things is creating site collections. I like to create my site collections in PowerShell. Sometimes you have to. There's certain like hostname site collections you have to, things like that. So you have to create your site collections in PowerShell, which is great. When you do that, it immediately makes you better looking and more attractive to whoever you want to be attractive to. You'll find it boosts your self-confidence, just all kinds of great stuff. But it does, for this particular operation, have one downside. When you create your site collections in PowerShell, it does not create the default groups. So, your owners and visitors and members and all those things you're used to seeing, people who have read-only and people who have, add content, people who can change configuration, that kind of stuff. Those default groups are not created when you create your site collection in PowerShell. Now, this sounds pretty scary, right? I know, but don't worry, I got the fix for you. This is easy stuff, and the great news about it is you get to use more PowerShell. So I just kind of randomly went out, because I don't have a blog post on this, but I randomly went out and Googled a blog post on it to have something to link to. But what you've got is at the root web, so you create your site collection, and your site collection is just a container, just a bunch of configuration settings. But at the root of that site collection is a special web called the root web. And so after you create your site collection, you want to grab that root web. So $web equal get sp web and then the URL to the site collection you just created. That gives you the root web object. Or if you've got the site collection object, you can do a .root web to get to that root web. But there is a method of the root web called create default associated groups. And if you run that, then that will create those groups for you. So it's kind of cool. It seems kind of stinky at the beginning because it doesn't do this thing that you're expecting it to do. But in reality, it's pretty cool because if you don't want all those groups, then you just don't create them. But if you do, then you just run this 1 line or 2 lines to create default associated groups. Now, that works for a bunch of things. Not just if you create it with PowerShell, but imagine you've had a user who's gone in and just completely mucked up all the SharePoint groups. I know, silly as it sounds, users would never do that, but hypothetically, just pulling this one out of the air, if somehow your SharePoint groups got all messed up, you could go in with PowerShell and delete them all, and then use the whole create default associated groups to create the default ones back up, and then, start over from scratch. So that's one. It's been this way since SharePoint 2010, so I kind of believe that it's a deliberate thing, but I don't do it enough that that I remember it. But this time it came up last week on this other thing, so I'm like, those folks that listen to my Netcast want to know this kind of stuff. They like PowerShell. They like groups. Joanne Klindt in the chat room is saying that in Canada users don't screw up their SharePoint groups. It's probably because they're just too polite. That's probably what it is. But that's a good one. I may or may not blog that. I may include it on my other blog post. We'll see. So this is one, and I got asked this today on Twitter, and I couldn't believe that I had never covered this before, but I don't think that I had. And I see now that it hasn't been updated in a couple of months, so I kind of feel kind of cruddy. But Microsoft has a page where they publish links to all the new content for SharePoint. So white papers and all that kind of stuff, anything that they have, knowledge base articles, all that kind of stuff. And that's on TechNet. So somebody on Twitter asked me today, so I wanted to put that out there, and that'll get it in the notes too. But it's just like an RSS feed kind of thing where they just aggregate all the recently published content for SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2010, SharePoint 2007, all that. So you can go out there. Honestly, I'm kind of a dork. I go out there once in a while just to see what they've published because it's good stuff. But they haven't published anything since December 17th. So I assume that means that they've just answered every question and they don't need to publish anything anymore. But there's really great stuff out there. So if you just want to see what's going on, hopefully they'll update that and they'll publish some new stuff. So wanted to share that with you guys. On the heels of that, I have another link that I want to share with you guys. This is the link to all the recent Microsoft downloads. So I don't know if there's one just for SharePoint or not, but I don't even remember where I grabbed this thing. But that is all of the downloads that Microsoft's recently put out for everything all over the company. But you can search for SharePoint, and that will give you whatever the recent downloads for SharePoint are. So if I look right now, it's the Microsoft Products and Technologies Protocol document, which sounds like delightful reading, the Microsoft Rights Management Connector, and the Windows Azure Virtual Machine Readiness Assessment. So again, if you just want to keep up with what's new with SharePoint and what Microsoft's put out, that first link will give you the documentation that they've put out, and the second link will be whatever downloads they've put out lately. So as a SharePoint dork, both of those things are great for me. This third one just kind of grabbed me. I don't even remember where I saw it, and you guys probably aren't even going to care about it, but it's something that that is a professional, something that I struggle with, and I think I talked about this a year or so ago, year and a half, I don't know, about feeling like a phony and this idea of the curse of knowledge and all that. I could go on and on and on. I've actually thought about it would be a fun keynote to do, because it's not, keynotes are not necessarily technical. They can be, inspirational, and Lord knows I'm an inspirational person, me and that Telling You Robins guy. But I saw this this blog post here, I don't know where, Facebook or something, and the title of it is "Everyone Has Imposter Syndrome Except for You." The idea behind this and the curse of knowledge and being a phony and all of that is that we just are not able to assess our own ability and our own knowledge and all that. And this idea is that, and this guy, I don't completely agree with the article, but it's thought-provoking just the same. The idea is that everybody has this imposter syndrome. Everybody feels like they're a phony, that that at any minute, the entire, whoever they're with, the entire SharePoint community or whatever, could figure out that they're faking it and they really don't know anything. Everybody has this, except you. Because you really are a phony. That's what this whole article is about, is that everybody has this imposter syndrome except for you, because you really are this person that doesn't know enough. And you really are a big phony that's on the verge of being found out. So I thought that was kind of interesting. In the chat room, Mark Chrisman linked up a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm a big fan of that paper. The Dunning-Kruger effect, and I think the name of the paper is actually called Unskilled and Unaware. But the idea behind that is that people can't self-assess themselves ever on anything, on their level of skill with anything. And the reason for that is because when you're a beginner at something, you don't know enough about it to know where you stand. So, for instance, a few months ago, I bought a guitar. I've been teaching myself how to play the guitar. And at the beginning, you don't know enough about anything. So you do a little bit, if you're doing PowerShell, you learn some commandlets and it catches and you get excited and you're like, wow, I'm really getting good at this PowerShell thing, because you just don't know enough about PowerShell to realize what you don't know. So same with the guitar, learn a few chords. The next thing I know, I'm going to be the next Keith Richards or Joe Perry or something. But then as you get more involved with a subject, any subject, PowerShell, guitar, knitting, Tiddlywinks, whatever, the more you learn about a subject, the more you know that you don't know. And then you start going the other way. So then you're now keenly aware of what you don't know, so you feel like you know less than you know. So you went from thinking you know more than you know, and you flip-flopped, and now you think you know less than you know because you're now aware of what you don't know. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is pretty interesting. If you've ever had any of those kind of ideas, I definitely recommend reading that, because it's just crazy about how the mind works about those kind of things. So that was an interesting read. This whole everyone has an imposter syndrome. I've thought about this whole curse of knowledge thing. Shane and I talk about this all the time, because somebody will ask me to do a session somewhere or ask me to write a blog post or a white paper, and I'll be like, I just can't, I don't know what to write about. I don't know anything. Everybody knows what I know. And he's like, you're an idiot. Pick a subject, write about it. People will love it, which I think is probably stretching it a great deal. But it's that same idea. So kind of the thing that I wanted to bring this around, the reason I wanted to bring it up was because if you're listening to this podcast, you clearly have run out of everything else on the internet to listen to, or are deeply masochistic. But also, on top of all those character flaws, you're probably very interested in SharePoint or PowerShell or SQL or whatever the other things that I talk about. But you probably think you don't know anything, and that's probably not true. I always tell people, people are like, well, I would start a blog, but I don't have anything to share. I don't know. That is absolutely not true. So what this imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger and all that kind of stuff, what I take from that is if you are interested in a topic, you've got something that other people want to know. There's always somebody who knows less than you. And the first time this came up, I think, in the context of my Netcast was Scott Hanselman. At Hansel Minutes had a thing about this, about being a phony. He was interviewing some guy and all that. And the guy made a great comment that I liked, that in order for you to look like an expert, you only need to know one more thing than the person you're talking to, because they just don't know. I mean, you know more than they do. They don't know how much you know, because then they would know what you know. And so to be an expert, you just need to know one thing more. But on the flip side of that, in order to be able to help somebody else, you just need to know one thing more that they don't know. So don't let this idea that there are people out there that know more than you keep you from sharing what you know, because everybody's got a different way of looking at things and different ways of explaining things and all that. So again, kind of the thing that I want you guys to take from this is, if you've got an interest, whatever it is, technical, not technical, whatever, if you feel like you want to share some stuff, but you just think that your message isn't good and that nobody's going to care, and you're going to publish your stuff and you're going to look dumb, you're not. It's your mind messing with you. You got this crazy imposter syndrome messing with your head. So go out there, start a blog, start a Netcast, do whatever, because I promise you that somebody wants to hear what you've got to say. So don't talk yourself out of it. Go out and do that. Okay, enough of the pep talk, folks. We're now going to the part that everybody actually showed up for. Not the obscure Canadian rock songs. but this shameless self-promotion. Not a lot of changes. Got a couple things to add. So the first thing here in a couple of weeks, oh my God, in a couple of weeks, is the SharePoint conference. You can go to SharePointConference.com and find out all about that. One thing that I would have done if I would have made better notes is they have released the times that all the sessions are now. And I think I've got one session on Tuesday and 2 sessions on Wednesday, but I forget now. But you can go to SharePointConference.com. I haven't checked lately, but if you just went to SharePointConference.com, all of the times were in UTC, so what we all used to call Greenwich Mean Time, UTC, which is 8 hours ahead of Vegas right now. So it would say things like, you know, if you had a session at 8:30 in the morning, or if you had a session at like 5:30 at night, it would show up as 1:30 a.m. So if you go to SharePointConference.com and the times seem crazy, try subtracting 8 hours and see if they seem less crazy. But also if you log into the MySPC thing, the times there are correct. They're in Pacific Standard Time. So again, I think I've got something on Tuesday, a couple on Wednesday. Of course, I have the pre-con on March the 2nd on Sunday, so I'm getting in Saturday night. But another thing to share is the good folks at Nintex are going to have a booth. You all know Nintex, bright orange, big burly guy with the kilt, Mike Fitzmaurice, Fitz to his friends. They're going to have a booth there Sunday night at like 7 or 7:30 or something like that. I'm going to be doing a little 15-minute thing there, a little dog and pony show. So if you get in Sunday night and are looking for something to do, Sunday night 7:30, I'll have some times on that. You can go see me. I'm going to be talking about some Nintex workflow stuff and how it relates to Rackspace. So check that out. Also, hopefully, we'll be getting some times on doing a Netcast tweet up, meet up, get together, pajama party, whatever we're going to do. Hopefully get some times on that. They still haven't nailed everything down yet. But I keep pestering them on your behalf so that we can get that figured out. But the SharePoint and conference is coming up. So they're asking in the chat room, am I wearing a kilt? Heavens no. Am I going to post a link to the parties? I haven't I've seen a couple, but I don't know. I don't know if Rackspace is having a party. I don't really want to invite people to somebody else's party. So probably won't be doing that. Then a month after that is SP TechCon. That is in San Francisco, April 22nd through the 25th. Doing some sessions there, doing a pre-con. Just made my hotel arrangements for that today, so I don't have to sleep outside with homeless folks. Very friendly, the homeless folks in San Francisco. You know, if you don't get a hotel, they're just very friendly, very nice folks. Very, very talkative, very chatty, very friendly. But that is April 22nd through the 25th. Be doing the Netcast live from there. You can find out all about that at sptechcon.com. And if that wasn't enough, if you hadn't had so much of me that you were just sick of me, then in May 12th through the 15th is Microsoft Tech Ed North America. That is in Houston, Texas. And I don't know the URL for that, but if you go out to your favorite search engine, Alta Vista, whatever, SharePoint or Tech Ed, that's in Houston. We're doing some sessions there. I don't think they've announced all the breakouts and all that yet, so I don't know what I'm doing, but we got that. And then another mystery event coming up. I don't have all the information on that yet, but we've got a mystery event that's going to be happening sometime after May that I'm going to be going to. So the people that I know that will be affected by that, I've kind of talked to some of them, but got a mystery event. I'm building anticipation, getting people excited. So I think that is it for tonight. I have once again gone over to the half-an-hour mark, just shot past it, didn't even look back behind me. Yeah, and so there's going to be big parties in Houston. We're all going to crash at Naomi's house. So you heard it here first. Just show up there. Yes, and ask Jeeves about the Tech Ed. He'll know all about it. So thanks, everybody. I think Netcast 188 was a rousing success. It had intrigue. It had excitement. Everything went well. So come back here next week. Hopefully you're not, you're down off your sugar high from Valentine's Day. Gentlemen, chances of me getting this rendered out before Valentine's Day are slim to none. But folks who are in relationships with other folks that would like something for Valentine's Day, it's coming up. So don't, you can never go wrong buying stuff for Valentine's Day. We're talking cards and flowers and chocolates, copies of Professional SharePoint 2013 Administration, always a good one. If you go out to Amazon, you can find it there. So there you go. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to the chat room. You guys have been great. We'll stick around for a while. We'll listen to some more obscure Canadian rock before I shut this down. But thanks for this. You can check me out on youtube.com/Todd Klindt Netcast. You can hit me up on Twitter @Todd Klindt or email me todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.